Yahoo Sports Jordan Shusterman joining us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. And Jordan, I was listening this morning on my way into Baseball Barbie Cast, and I was listening to you and Jake talk about Seattle's loss to Detroit. And one part of the conversation struck me, which is when you guys were debating, you know, when do you point to a manager, or how much can you really point to a manager in any game, but especially a postseason game when so much of it is also on player execution and pitch placement and swing decisions and all of that. It's hard here not to talk about Dan Wilson. It's his first postseason. There's been some critiques over the season just to wonder, God, is A.J. Hinch winning this? But I'll start with the manager conversation. To what extent did you see Dan Wilson as in any way responsible for what happened yesterday for Seattle?
I think it was a lower percentage, and I think, you know, the context that we were kind of bringing that up, and it's hard, and I think that, again, the postseason is when managers really take center stage, and I think when you have such a sharp contrast like we have in this one, just based on the experience, it's an easy talking point, but I also think a relevant one, right? I think in the case of the game yesterday, again, Gabe Spire's been nails, and sometimes your good players don't perform like good players, and that's as bad as you're going to see him. I mean, it was just from a pitch location, pitch execution standpoint, it just wasn't anywhere close to good enough. And it's disappointing, and it's a lot harder for, I know fans, our inclination is oftentimes to want to blame the manager or blame the front office or whatever. Like, sometimes the players aren't good enough, and Gabe Spire will be the first person to tell you that. It's a disappointing outcome, but in that case, I think, yeah, he was in the spot, in the game at the right time.
What do you think about this matchup coming up on Friday? It's Skubal. You're trying to beat them for the fourth time, but you are at home. The Mariners have had a lot of success at home. Who needs to shine on Friday for these guys to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, however they decide to roll out the pitchers, and that's where, again, Dan Wilson's going to come back into it. Now, obviously, they are going to have maybe not a scripted plan for how the game is going to go, and that's why, because you can't do that. In these postseason games, it is very clear that you have to be able to make tough decisions when the game and the script does not go accordingly. That said, they're going to have some sort of idea how they want to use Kirby, how they want to use Castillo, and those two pitchers are going to have to show up, because as we also kind of talked about on the show today, I mean, can they get to Skubal? Yes. Are they going to blast Skubal out of the ballpark? That just seems unrealistic. So I expect it to be another tight game like the first two, and they're just going to have to come up with a big hit, which, of course, they were able to in Game 2, were unable to in Game 1. They're going to have to do it in Game 5 if they're going to move on.
I think fans were probably encouraged to hear many of the Mariners beat reporters yesterday tweet, hey, the clubhouse is actually pretty optimistic. They're really hungry. They're looking at Game 5 like you'd think it would be somber given, you know, just the absolute beatdown from Wednesday, but they're all pretty excited about Game 5. I think that was a good tone to read about, obviously. What do you think might be giving those players a lot of confidence heading into this one?
Yeah, this is something that I've thought about a lot, not just in this specific case, but as I've had the privilege of being in these clubhouses after tough games, after close games, and it really is amazing how these teams are able to kind of turn the page. And in some times, a case like this, it's interesting because that game yesterday was kind of both. On one hand, you could say, oh, you were dominating for 4 innings, you could see the finish line, and then it all fell apart. The other way you could say is when the Tigers just roll like that and everything goes wrong after those innings, it's almost easier to kind of put that aside as opposed to, you know, the game 1 loss, you know, the close loss where it really lingers and you're thinking about that one moment. Yesterday, it was just the Tigers' day, and I think they feel good going back home. They feel confident because they've had the success against Skubal to a degree, and I think that they just feel good about their chances at home, which you could understand why that's the case. They've won a lot of games there recently.
What's the evolution of Dan Wilson been like? What have you seen? What are you learning, and what do you think he's learning throughout this whole process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that he is – I will say that you definitely notice in-game, and this was true even over the last couple of weeks of the regular season, I mean, just I think more emotion publicly. I think just his reactions to some of the successes on the field has been a lot more visible. It's like, all right, he's really feeling this in the same way. But I think he's the first to tell you that he's figuring out as he goes too. Obviously, he has, you know, a coaching staff that has been through some of this more recently. But I don't know. I think, again, every move is going to be magnified. And like I said, I keep repeating it, but it's just a contrast. I mean, the way that A.J. Hinch talks about managing postseason baseball is above, forget just Dan Wilson. I mean, he speaks about it in more specific and eloquent and just detailed ways than really any manager we really have in today's game. And so that's what really stands out. But hey, they're both former major league catchers. They've both, got here in very different ways. And we're going to see what both of these guys have for this upcoming game.
It feels silly asking about a bat that's going to be especially relevant against the best pitcher in the postseason. But that being said, is there a bat you look at with Seattle where you go, God, like if this guy has a great game, I feel so much better about Seattle's chances?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think because he didn't really do much in Detroit, but obviously what he was doing at home is just back to Julio, right? We've been talking about him all year. I am also still waiting for that big Randy moment. He's been kind of, he led off the game against Skubal with a hit, so maybe he's got a big swing in there, the right on left matchup. But yeah, Randy and Julio, I think at the top of the lineup are the ones I'm watching. Cal has been steady all throughout. I expect him to continue to give some quality at bats. And I mean, obviously the Polanco at bats are going to be absolute theater tomorrow at the very least, based on what happened in Game 2. So, but yeah, Julio and Randy are the ones I'm really, really thinking a lot about for both of those guys. You get Randy for these moments, and then of course Julio, who showed up big in those first couple games, can he kind of turn it back on in front of the home crowd? I would not be surprised whatsoever.
Hey, what did you think about Miller's performance yesterday?
I honestly, everything you could ask for. I know that you leave him in there to face Dingler. Dingler had crushed the ball in his first at-bat to center, and maybe you worry. Maybe that's a moment where you say, Dingler looked pretty comfortable, and then he ultimately starts that rally there when he faces him a second time. But, going into the game, I mean, if you said he was going to pitch into the fifth, I think you'd have to be feeling pretty good about that. And so it's been a really tough year for Bryce Miller. The fact that he even had to step up in the situation because of Wu's injury is a difficult spot for him. And just knowing Bryce Miller, the character, the personality, someone who's beloved in that clubhouse almost as much as anybody, it's disappointing the way that game unfolded because, again, it really looked like we were setting up for the story to be about him in a positive way if he was able to, get through that inning unscathed and then the bullpen could shut it down. But obviously it wasn't to be. But that effort was still important, I think, for him to even get that deep into the game, I think was impressive, all things considered.
Hey, I got a big picture question that's going to ultimately ask you to kind of, talk about your outlook for Seattle in 2026. By no means do I want to eulogize a season that could, for Seattle, still have two big series here. So that's not like the direction that I want to head in. But I was thinking about this a lot yesterday, just based on not only the way I was feeling, I'm a local, so that you know, or a lot of the tone that I saw from fans. But Jordan, if you watch the broadcast for 2 seconds, you would hear them mention at some point that Seattle's the only team to never be in a World Series. Obviously, it hasn't been in this place for 24 years. There are generations of fans, an entire fan base that's never seen a World Series, but generations that have experienced playoff baseball for the first time. So I think that there is an anxiety that exists with some have-nots in baseball of, oh my God, what if we don't get back here? And while you have the Yankees that are looking at World Series droughts, there is no doubt that they will spend. There is no doubt that that the expectation will be to get to a World Series, to get through the playoffs. I think that what a lot of Mariners fans, Jordan, might be feeling right now as they head into a pivotal Game 5, which they can still win, is, oh my God, what if this is it? What if they don't get back next year? What if this is the best that we see for a long time? So I guess even though we'll talk more when the season ultimately does wrap, whenever that ends up being, I wanted to ask about just your overall outlook for this club, and maybe in the hopes, right, that there's some positivity or optimism.
Yeah. I mean, I still think there's serious reasons to expect this team to be very good again next year, however the offseason shakes out. I mean, there are so many serious building blocks in place that there are just not a lot of teams that can lean on, and that's on both sides of the ball. And there's certainly been some questions, and certainly some of the injuries that they dealt with this year on the mound have kind of shown some cracks in that. But we know how strong the farm is. We know that they have Julio and Cal in place, and that alone, I mean, Julio and Cal alone as your position player core, just stop right there. That is so much better than what so many other teams can lean on, that I think that you can't lose sight of that. But the opportunity is still there. I think that that they have a great chance to win this game and finally, put that tagline, that common refrain that you hear on every broadcast, which, by the way, I don't blame them for saying that all the time because it's a huge deal. I mean, it's an easy fun fact, but it's also a kind of a remarkable one, right? Because why does that fun fact hit so hard? It's because teams that have only existed for 25 years have all managed to make it, whether it's the Rays and the Rockies have been there and the Marlins have been there and the Diamondbacks. This is approaching a half a century of not being able to do it and most of a half a century of not even getting remotely close. And so I know that this is a fan base conditioned to assuming that they're never going to get there again, but I also think that this team, they've built up enough to believe that they should be contending for this at least for the foreseeable future because of the foundation that they have in place. But that is not to take this opportunity for granted whatsoever.
Hey, what did you make of the Blue Jays Yankees series? I love the celebration of Big Papi and Vladdy at the end of that one. Did that one pan out the way you thought?
I was definitely one of the people who was falling for the Yankees' talent once they survived the Red Sox and just thinking, all right, maybe they can. They do have enough to kind of get back at the Blue Jays for the regular season, and that was not to discount the Blue Jays because I believe that Toronto's awesome. They earned that division title, but man, oh man, did they just take it to them? I mean, this was not even. Yes, you had that one big Judge moment in Game 3, which is of course going to linger, but the Blue Jays were the better team, and it wasn't particularly close. I mean, they have their weaknesses too, and they're not infallible, but man, did they exploit the Yankees' weaknesses. They leaned on their own strengths, and they just took it to them. And they are a really, really fun, balanced team. And we'll see, if the Mariners are able to advance, I think that would be an incredibly fun matchup because of some of the contrasts in styles and just the personalities on both sides of the ball. But Vlad Jr. is a true delight. I mean, having him be a part of this postseason and really get to have his moment when you think about what he's kind of gone through, not just over the past year, but over his entire career. He is so much fun to watch, and I'm so glad that he's kind of getting to be center stage here because he's earned it, and that whole franchise has.
I know that postseason losses can come with heartbreak for a fan base, but they also come with really fascinating conversations. Sticking with that Blue Jays-Yankees series, one of the ones that was being had by the broadcast crew afterwards was about how the Yankees were built, whether they were too reliant on the home run. I found it an interesting one because the Blue Jays out-homered the Yankees, and I don't know that that's why New York lost, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that speaks more to it's not that the Blue Jays can't hit homers, it's that the Yankees – when you get into these playoff series, and I'll be honest, like this is a very real concern with the Mariners as well. I think that when you have, if they do advance, you're going to hear very similar talking points because you could argue that the Mariners and the Yankees offenses in some respects are built in similar ways. I think the Mariners have a little bit more, maybe it's not quite as powerful, but it's a little bit more diverse in terms of the speed and some of the left-right components, but it's the same kind of thing. There is still a good amount of three true outcome, walks, strikeouts, and homers. I think with the Blue Jays is the Yankees clearly in these shorter series, a lot of their hitters, it's just not an approach that is necessarily conducive for high-stakes situations, whereas, over the course of a full season, you're going to put up some pretty good numbers and win a lot of games. But if you got teams that know how to game plan against you and know how to execute, and even you're going to have games like Game 3 where it all falls apart and the Yankees score a bunch of runs, like that's going to happen. But the Blue Jays just executed, and their offense is maybe a little bit of a higher floor, especially for big games like this because they don't strike out. They're going to put the ball in play. They're going to be able to situationally hit. So I would expect that to remain a pretty big storyline. And honestly, even if Detroit advances too, because they also clearly have, in some cases, for the most part until yesterday, struggled in a lot of those spots to kind of have productive at-bats throughout these postseason games.
All right, last one, just a quick one here, but you've got 3 more series continuing. Obviously, Detroit and Seattle. Game 5 is going to be on Friday. In the meantime, the Cubs have forced Game 4. The Phillies force another. Is there a series between these two NLDS ones that you're especially looking forward to?
Yeah, so I'm excited to just sit on my couch and enjoy those 2 games tonight.
Just eat and watch baseball.
So, yeah, I should also – yes, exactly. I should clarify because I talked about that. I'm not coming to Seattle for Game 5. If they do advance, I will be there next week. So that would be or in Detroit. We'll see how that goes. But as for tonight, it's Dodgers, Phillies. Listen, the Cubs and Brewers, I am enjoying for sure. the star power for Dodgers Phillies and kind of the stakes for both those franchises is extremely compelling. And if the Phillies can force a Game 5 for how low the vibes were after Game 2, that would be quite the theater to see the Phillies back in Philadelphia on Saturday. So that's definitely the game I'm most excited to watch tonight.
Yahoo Sports Jordan Shusterman, kind enough to join us on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline in a very, very, very busy week and busy month for you. Jordan, thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, guys. Always fun.